top of the morning, and it is a beaut.
And the hope of the Irish as the future champion of the world.
A podcast is kind of like it's like a radio show that's not on the radio.
Welcome to the Barry J. McDonald podcast. The place where dreams get dusted off and acted on. Because life is too short. We're living on a rock that's flying through space, and hey, what the hell else were you going to do with yourself here?
Hi, this is Barry here, and you are very, very welcome to today's podcast episode. Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you ever feel overwhelmed? Do you ever feel overworked? Do you ever feel like you've got too much on your plate? Now, if you do, the chances are the reason you feel that way is because you are scared. Now, those aren't my words. Those are a book I'm reading at the moment called Refuse to Choose by Barbara Sher. Now, I've been talking about something I discovered about myself recently in a podcast, I think 2 or 3 podcast episodes back, where I discovered that I was a multipotentialist. Now, you may be the same way as well too. So, if you haven't heard that podcast episode, the kind of basic summary of being a multipotentialite is someone who does sometimes one project after another really quickly, or someone who kind of jumps around, having a go at this and having a go at that, and not really staying dedicated to one thing. Now, I used to think people like that were flaky, that, I used to kind of look down at my nose at them and used to say, well, why can't you stick to one thing? Why can't you just do podcasting? Or why can't you do blogging or whatever? Why are you jumping around all the time? And I found when I looked at my own kind of path to where I am right now, I was as bad as everyone else. I was jumping around. Now, the reason us multipotentialites do that is because when we kind of, learn about something new, like when we get excited about blogging, we throw ourselves into blogging. We read the books, we watch the videos, we do the courses, we'll do blogging for a while, and then we'll find that we'll reach this point where it just doesn't excite us anymore. We have enough information about blogging, we know how to do it, and the spark for blogging just simply dies off. And then we find that there's something else kind of lights us up, maybe podcasting or maybe doing photography or something like that, and we kind of go off on that kind of we go off on that route after that. And again, that leads to something for a while, and then we lose the spark for that, and then we go on to something else. So I had found this past, couple of months, looking back at some of the things I've done in the past, I've been doing some kind of introspective kind of inside work, and I found that, I was like that. I was jumping around from one thing to the other, and that kind of led me to discovering that I was a multipotentialite. So that is why I'm reading the book at the moment, which is called Refuse to Choose by Barbara Sher. Now, if you are someone who does do a lot of jumping around like that, it could be that maybe you are that. So I would recommend reading the book by Barbara Sher to find out more, and just to maybe be a bit more forgiving on yourself, because I was kind of someone who was really hard on myself. I used to say to myself, Barry, why can't you stick to this one thing? Why can't you find your passion? Why can't you find the thing that you will do for the rest of your life? And from reading Barbara's book, I'm so glad that I'm not like that, because, who wants to stick to the same career for the rest of your life? Now, getting back to what I talked about earlier, being overworked, and Barbara Sher saying about you being scared. Now, she gives an example in this book of this gentleman who was totally overwhelmed and overworked. When she met him, he was unpacking groceries in the car. He had a group of children running around him. He was totally overwhelmed, and he was, herding everybody to the house. And he was trying to say to her that, he'd barely any time to do anything. His wife was working in whatever jobs they were working in, and by the time they finished in the evening time, it was sorting out the kids for bedtime and sorting out meals, and by that time in the evening, they were just totally, overwhelmed, exhausted, and couldn't actually work on the things that they'd like to do. So whatever business he was looking to do, he just couldn't get started because he just felt totally just exhausted. And he used to say that, some evenings he used to set up kind of, surfing on the internet, looking for all these kind of, make money at home businesses, but he could never really find one that was right for him. And he was kind of telling Barbara Sher this story, and she kind of said to him, well, the reason that you are the way you are is because you are scared. Now, maybe you're kind of having the same reaction to me, because I would have said, no, I'm not scared at all. You know, the reason I'm overwhelmed is because I'm overwhelmed. I just have that many projects to do. I've got family stuff, kid stuff, driving stuff. You know, I have a lot of things that I need to do, and that is why I'm overwhelmed. It's not because I am scared. But the more I've listened to Barbara Sher's example and how she kind of coaches this gentleman, the more I totally agree with her. And what she said was the reason that he is overwhelmed is because he wants to feel in control of everything. He wants to feel that, you know, everybody can depend on him, you know, that he's always there for the kids. He's always there for his boss. He's always there for his wife. And he takes on more and more projects because he doesn't want to let people down, that people can depend on him. And because he doesn't want to let people down, because he's taken more projects on, of course, it's reaching a point where he is just overwhelmed. And he's almost like that person who is, you know, spinning those plates on those little sticks. He's kind of running from one thing to the other, trying to keep everybody happy and not drop any plates and not disappoint anybody. And the more I've thought about it in my own life, I found that, yeah, I was the same too. She actually talks at a point that people like this gentleman have probably been, you know, carefree, lackadaisy, didn't have any stress or anything on in their life years ago, and then they will reach a point where they just feel overwhelmed. And when I think back to before we had kids, before we had a mortgage and all that, I remember my girlfriend at the time, Catherine, saying to me that, you know, Barry, I've never seen anybody as relaxed or as easygoing as you. You know, I was so easygoing years ago that, you know, sometimes I could have been lying on the floor. I was that, you know, laid back and taking it easy, but I had no stress. But for whatever happened, some point in my life, I just reached this point where everything stressed me out. You know, I was stressed about the mortgage. I was stressed about my job. I was stressed about my marriage. I was stressed about my kids. And I don't know what point that I had reached that at, but I suddenly transformed from someone who was totally, you know, almost like Bob Marley sitting somewhere smoking ganja, to somebody who was just panicking about everything, that I needed to be in control of everything. And the more I've kind of looked at that example that Barbara Sher talks about, the more I've said, yeah, I was overwhelmed, and the reason I was getting myself more and more overwhelmed is because I was taking more responsibility onto myself. I felt responsible for the mortgage. I felt responsible for my job. I felt responsible that I had to keep my wife happy, that I had to keep my kids safe, and that I had to, you know, blog every certain amount of days, or I had to do this activity all the time. And I was taking on more and more and more, and it was stressing me out and stressing me out. And when I look at that example Barbara Sher talks about, yeah, I was scared. I was scared of letting any of those things go. You know, I was scared of, you know, maybe lifting some responsibility of worrying about my kids, you know, that I wasn't watching them, you know, constantly in playgrounds, they didn't fall over, didn't hurt themselves. I was constantly worrying about them. Would they pick the right career? Were they getting on well at school? I used to worry, is my wife happy? You know, how can I make her even more happier? How can I maybe take some of the stress off that she has in her work? I used to worry, you know, in the blogging, podcasting and everything I was doing, I used to worry, you know, am I giving my followers enough content? Am I, you know, treating my customers well? Am I giving them products that are helping them transform their business and transform their lives? And as you can probably see, when you've got all that kind of stuff spiraling around and around and around in your head, it's no wonder that I felt overwhelmed and overworked. So what I'm thinking right now is that, you know, I have been a big scaredy cat. I have been scared for everybody, and I've been taking on that responsibility. And maybe it's time for me just to, you know, start to relax, or trying to think back to that younger version of me who had, you know, who was lackadaisy, who was just carefree, who didn't really care. And when I look back at that person, you know, he always got the bills paid on time. He always was fed. He always had a roof over his head. He always had money in his pocket. And all this kind of overwhelmed, overstressed, all that, it never really did anything for me. You know, it didn't put any more money into my pocket. It didn't put a better roof over my head. It didn't make me feel any healthier. In fact, it was actually pushing me in the opposite direction. So What I'm trying to do maybe is trying to maybe relax a little bit more on the reins, letting some of those things go. Looking at my business and saying to myself, Barry, you don't need to do all of this. You don't need to show up so often to create content. You don't need to worry so much about your customers. You don't need to worry if they use your product at all. When you sell them the product, when they give you the cash, it's up to them to do what they want to do with it. Again, I used to worry about that. I used to worry, I hope they're opening the product today. I hope they're reading that PDF. I hope they're watching the videos. And sometimes I used to go into my YouTube dashboard, have a quick look through of the videos just to see, were people actually watching the videos? And I used to worry, when they didn't watch those videos, I felt that I was responsible for that. And not thinking to myself, well, if they don't use the product, it's their responsibility to use it. They have paid me for it. If they don't use it, well, that's their loss and not mine. But again, I wasn't thinking like that. I took that on as another responsibility, another chore, another thing that I needed to, take care of. So, if you are, sorry, maybe I'm a bit long-winded in this podcast episode, and if I do apologize, but I'm just trying to explain where I am, what I found, and maybe giving you some help as well too, because if you are overwhelmed, if you are overworked, it could be just like me. You could be scared. You could be maybe afraid to release some parts of your business. Maybe you're afraid of hiring somebody to maybe do your videos, or maybe repurpose your content, or maybe write your fiction books, or whatever it is. Maybe you feel that you need to, be active in your business, know exactly what's happening in every part of your business, and do all that yourself. But maybe the best part for you could be right now is to release some of those parts of your business away. Outsource it. Give it to some piece of software. Give it to someone who can do that job better than you. And you will find that your business will probably run a lot smoother, but it's going to lift a task off you. It's going to lift some of that overwhelm off you. And again, too, maybe not worrying so much about your followers, not worrying so much if people like your content. Give them the best content that you can give them, but not worrying too much. Well, what's the stats on this podcast episode? How many people listened to it? How many people liked my Facebook post? Stop worrying about that. Just put the content out there and leave that responsibility up to your followers, the algorithm or whatever, and not to worry about that. So, if you are a little bit scared, if you are a little bit overwhelmed, overworked, just feel like you have too much on your plate, have a look and, think for a moment, am I scared? And none of us like to admit that as adults that we are scared. And, this could be, a big light bulb moment for you that you might need to step back a little bit or just kind of release the reins on life, because being overwhelmed, taking on too much work, it's not going to do you any good. It's not going to put more money in your pocket. It's not going to allow you to create your best content or whatever, because you're just almost like this kind of tight, tense muscle that isn't going to work properly. You're not going to be your best self. So relax a little, but see maybe if that you are a little bit scared and, take some action to try and release some of that work from you, to allow you to enjoy life more, to relax more, and to get more out of you. So as always, thanks for giving me your time today. I hope I didn't take up too much of it. I probably did go off on a little bit of a ramble there, but I just wanted to try and explain the situation I'm in at the moment, and hopefully my situation will help you as well too. Have a lovely day and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Before you go, Barry wants to show you how you can use the power of stories to sell more of your products and services. He says that if you head on over to the rightcome.com website now, he'll show everything you need to do. Have a great day, and thanks for dropping by.